another edition of the Ad Podcast. We've got a great guest for you guys today. I think you're going to be pretty excited. Eric Zuncic is the Global Managing Director and Chief Product Officer of Forsman Bodenfors. Prior, he was Chief Strategy Officer at DDB North America. He was also Chief Strategy Officer at famed agency Crispin Bogusky, overseeing major accounts such as Domino's, Infinity, and Hershey's. And he is also a Harvard MBA. Eric, thanks so much for coming on, man.
You bet. Thanks for having me, Dylan.
So I like to give everybody a origin story. I think it's always fun to understand, what drives people into this agency and agency world. And you've worked at, such a who's who list throughout your career. And, you've also gone the higher ed, route of going for your MBA at a prestigious institution like Harvard. So tell me a little bit about where you grew up, what'd you study and where'd you study as an undergrad, and what got you into the advertising world?
Yeah, great. Thanks. I've been very lucky to work with some great people at some great places. Grew up outside of Chicago in the western suburbs, a little town called LaGrange Park, Illinois. And really just grew up trying to be like my older brother, trying to do all the things he did and then avoid the things he did that he got in trouble for. Huge sports kid. And so competition has always been really strong among my motivations. And I think that is one of the things that drove me into this industry. I won't go that far ahead yet, though. And growing up as a kid, I was just always fascinated with the variety of things available to humans, and fascinated with the psychology behind how and why we choose like what we're going to do and why that's my favorite, or why does my brother really like this brand of jeans, but I don't relate to them. It was always like my brain was always working, trying to figure that stuff out. And I think part of the reason that this industry is so interesting to me is that a lot of things happen to be intuitive to me, like the way things work or how something mechanically functions. But people are really hard to figure out. And like, why not go into an industry where you're trying to solve the hardest business problems with the hardest human problems attached to them? So that's always been kind of the mix of things for me. Through high school, I was just I guess it's like a normal high school athlete kid who really cared about sports and friends, and got pretty good grades because I worked hard. And things came pretty intuitively, like I said. Went to the University of Richmond for undergrad and really got stuck into like a business marketing and then leadership studies track. Leadership studies ended up being all about power and influence and how to lead. Whereas the business side and the marketing side specifically was all about psychology and consumer behavior and things like that. So that mix of things just remained with me my whole life. And I remember as a kid, we'd go on vacation, we'd road trip to Florida, and like the brands would be slightly different in Florida than they were in Chicago, and that would like blow my mind. and then we road tripped to Toronto and then up to Saskatchewan once. And like that totally blew my mind, like seeing street signs in a different language, seeing brands that were like the same brand but with a different name as they were where I grew up. It was just an eye opener for me. And studied abroad in Copenhagen when I was an undergrad, and again just an explosion of experiences of like, oh, I didn't know that you could sell potato chips that way instead of this way, or even like the school cafeteria where I studied had this really obscene picture of vegetables having sex, trying to like get you to eat more vegetables. And
leave it to the Europeans to have racy advertising.
It was something else. I actually stole that poster. I bet it's rolled up someplace in my parents' basement right now. But I pulled that thing down one day. It was like I had a whole thing with my friends. I was like, I'm going to get that poster. I'm going to roll it up, stick it down my pant leg. They probably would have just let me walk out if I wanted. Anyway.
There's probably only crazy people like you and I have, advertising as our artwork in our houses, or maybe more people do than. And I also big thing for me is like surfboards and skateboards
Totally.
because they're like they're brand representations, but they're also pieces of art, you know.
It's funny you mentioned that. I mentioned my older brother. He was like early in the 1980s skater culture, like before now when it's like cool
Mm.
and like with the giant pants and weird haircuts. And I was always fascinated by the level of design and craftsmanship that went into skateboard art, and I would collect the stickers. He kept skating, I stopped skating. But like I collected all the stickers and I loved all the brands, and I kind of like kept in touch in that world. So that design universe really influenced me quite a bit, which was cool. But yeah, I studied marketing. Was down in Richmond, Virginia, trying to get a job at an ad agency back home in Chicago because I wanted to get home. I believe I sent out 46 cover letters and job applications, and I heard zero. I didn't get a single
Wow.
response from anybody. Um, which was fascinating to me because I was like, I get good grades. I'm in like marketing classes. I thought this would be a little bit, yeah, I'm at a pretty good school. Like I thought this would be much easier to just show up. And what I found was that, just because I liked something didn't mean that anyone thought I was going to be good at it for a job. And that was always my mindset was I want whatever my job is going to be, since I can't be a professional athlete, I wasn't good enough. Whatever my job is going to be, it's going to be something that I'm good at and that I enjoy doing. And so the enjoy doing part was easy because my marketing classes and everything taught me, oh, I like this stuff. But the good at part, I had to prove before I could really do it.
Mm.
The quick version then of my journey is went to Geico Insurance client side, not even into the marketing department. I went into a leadership development program over there where I
Oh,
rotated.
that's awesome. You're the second guest on the podcast who has come up through the Geico leadership program. There's a guy, Ryan Hartman, who became an insurance agent through Geico, went through their leadership program, and then ended up having basically launching their digital department. So I love that that's a through line.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what was so fascinating about that experience that really taught me what a brand is I touched all the parts of the business and then landed in marketing. And so by the time I showed up in marketing, I had this holistic view of hundreds of different touch points that influenced the consumer experience. And then I landed in the marketing department where we were basically just making the public promise of what all those other 100 touch points were going to live up to. And what I realized very quickly, and probably the most influential project in my career, was I did a customer touch point project early days at Geico to really understand how many touch points there were with customers and non-customers and prospects, and what the right number was and what level of the brand needed to be apparent in each of those things. And it just taught me so much about these like advertising blinders that ad agencies have on when there's
Mm.
99 other touch points that are just as important or influential to attracting, retaining, or satisfying a customer. And so that for me was like my big holistic, oh, like brand equals everything. and
Mm.
and the idea that a brand led organization has to have its brand strategy really aligned with its business strategy, right? And so at Geico, they had a 50-year competitive advantage in underwriting. They had basically better data so they could make more money by more accurately assessing who was and wasn't going to get in an accident. And they then became the low cost provider as a brand and put everything around 15 minutes can save you 15%, which also
Mm.
taught me, by the way, that marketing or a brand idea can actually completely alter the dynamics of an entire category. So for 60
Wow.
years pre Geico, the drivers of who you chose as your insurance company were, who do I trust, who's nearby to me, who do my parents use, things like that,
Yeah, it
right?
was relationship driven. It was, like a real estate agent or a lawyer or a doctor, right? It was
Right.
kind of this
Yeah, and
professional services group.
money, how much does it cost, was like 12th on that list. But because of a business model advantage aligned to a brand strategy, Geico was able to convince an entire country and now an entire world that a direct to consumer model in that world, powered by the internet, which gives you more information and more autonomy and more agency over your choices, makes it easy to shop, easy to switch, easy to buy, and change the dynamic so that now it's cost and customer satisfaction and things like that are at the top, and no longer who did my parents have and are they nearby to me, and those. So I love those big challenges, because you think about a category like insurance that had been untouched and super profitable for decades, and then somebody comes in and happens to have this really magical brand and business strategy alignment and says, let's change the rules of the game and tilt the whole playing field to our advantage. That so I had those two experiences at the same place at the same time, right? Holistic, everything is brand, and you can change a category when your business and brand strategy are aligned. And I would argue that set like rewired my brain as to what brand and marketing are and where growth can come from in business, full stop.
Yeah, I love that. I think you hit a couple of things that I'd love to pause on before we continue on your journey, and maybe that'll be just kind of how this conversation
You
goes.
bet.
But do you think this idea of a leadership program or a rotational is something that more brands should be thinking about? That their marketers shouldn't just be pure play marketers, but they should start in the front lines, or at least have a period of time where they get to be more customer centric or more interfacing with the end users of their products, so they have a better understanding of the whole model. I remember one of the things that fascinated me but was frustrating as an agency guy was at Nestle. Every 6 months our clients would go and do something completely different. Like they would go work on another brand. Well, that was kind of cool because maybe you could go with them. But like sometimes they would go from marketing to like product innovation, and they'd be like busy in laboratories, like cooking up the next Hot Pockets recipe, or like traveling around and doing food innovation, and like stoked for them because they're having this amazing, completely new experience that's outside of the world of marketing. And I'm sure very beneficial to their career, not so much as, an agency guy trying to follow them around and continue to work with them. But, eventually they come back. But do you think some version of a leadership program or rotation would benefit more clients to have their marketers have a more 360 degree of the business?
So I'm going to answer that question in a second, I promise. But first,
Sure, let's go.
I'm going to not answer the question by saying I think it's I think it's much more important for agencies to spend a day, a week, a month in the shoes of their clients than it
Mm,
is for clients to spin around their business. That's the first thing, right? When I was at Crispin, a bunch of the team at Crispin that was working on Domino's actually went and worked in a restaurant for I think 3 weeks, right? And it just like it totally changed how they came back and thought about interaction with customers, where marketing can add value, where design is important, all those things, right? And gave people a real clear-headed view as to where the stories are hidden. One of our clients that I won't name because they're brand new, we just went up to their factory 2 weeks ago and did like the whole experience of how they make their product. And we walked out of there with like the next 4 campaigns, because you see the stuff, you're in it, and then you can really represent it and storytell around it and find the magic in it. Now, back to your question. I'm of two minds as to whether I believe more marketers should be rotating through their business. My first comment is absolutely right. Like the broader view that anyone has of the business and all the touch points and how it makes money and all that, the better a marketer they're going to be, the better a client they're going to be to an agency or a growth partner. And the more they're going to understand the role of marketing in the broader organization.
yeah, no, I love that. You mentioned about the client immersion. This podcast actually was me needing to get up to speed on Adobe tools when I first started working on the business.
Nice.
I actually launched the podcast just because I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to work on this business, I need to have at least like a general understanding of how the tools work. So I launched the podcast to get familiar with Adobe Edition and Creative Cloud. And yeah, I traveled extensively with them for 8 years, always going to the conferences that they would go to, whether I had an activation or something to do at the conference or not, just going there, being with the client, learning what they cared about and what markets they cared about. So I think you're right. I think if you're going to be a great account person or just a great person on a brand at an agency, you should go the extra mile to put yourself in the shoes of your clients as much as possible. So I love that insight. I think that's a great idea. All right. So the other thing that I wanted to ask you about Geico is, what came first? Was it the brand or this new revolutionary business model? Like the Geico Gecko, was that, after they had brought through this breakthrough new way of approaching insurance and they needed, that creative hook in order to generate and compete in what many would say the most competitive category in the advertising industry? Or was it something that needed to happen in tandem with the brand?
Yeah, great question. So I hope I do this story justice. Someone like Ted Ward would be much, much better at telling this story. But my understanding of it from my experience was that Warren Buffett, who was a massive investor in Geico from the very early days, and wholly owns Geico now, or Berkshire Hathaway does rather, saw the internet coming and looked around at different industries that had cost advantages that were going to be commoditized by the internet. And he said that insurance, it's coming. Pricing
Mm,
transparency, and whoever wins the internet is going to change the rules of how insurance works. Now, the business model advantage had been since the day Geico started. I'm not going to go into the details of that. I think some of it's proprietary. But they always had it was like Walmart. It was always a low cost company. It was always, when you're traveling, you go to the cheapest hotel you can that's closest to the office. You share a car if you're renting a car, etc. Right? So
yeah.
low cost culture was always part of the business. Direct to consumer was always part of the business. Geico stands for Government Employees Insurance Company. So they had this captive audience of government
Mm.
employees. They don't need a bunch of storefronts. You need to send mail to people who are government employees and say, I have a good deal for you. Um, the brand stuff came from Warren Buffett and Tony Nicely and Bill Rogers and Ted Ward kind of saying, hey, if Warren's right, which he usually is, um, and this is going to be a commodity, and we have the low cost advantage, we need as many people to know, one, it's really easy to shop for new insurance, and two, you can save money with Geico. And
Mm.
credit to the Martin Agency for taking that business strategy and turning it into a brand strategy that revolved around save money. And it's so easy a caveman can do it, right? Ease of use. Money savings plus ease of use was the secret formula to unlock an entire industry. And that then became what everyone else tried to play catch up to, but couldn't because they had high cost agent models, Progressive being one of the alternatives, like Geico, direct to consumer. And so it was a business model advantage that got turned into a brand advantage at exactly the right time as a revolution swept through the internet, right?
That's awesome. I love, you think about these big brands and sometimes you don't know the inside baseball of how it all went down and who was behind it. So I love that. Thanks for walking us through that. So how long did you stay at Geico? And then where'd you go next?
So I was there for about 4 years, and I learned very quickly that I was spending like every night reading Ad Age and like nerding out on the Burger King campaign from Crispin, or the crazy I'm trying to remember the other work from that time, the Volkswagen stuff that DDB
Yeah,
was
like
doing
the Star Wars stuff
earlier
for the
than that,
Super
much earlier than
Bowl.
that,
Oh wow. Okay.
like relaunching the Volkswagen Beetle and things
Oh
like that,
yeah.
right? So I was spending all my time doing that, and then like once a week, I would meet with the Martin agency, and like would my face would melt from all the information and insights and cool stuff and the ideas we didn't get to make. And I was like, man,
Mm.
if I'm spending all my free time, if my hobby is being an ad nerd and my favorite days at work are the ones when I'm with the agency, like maybe I should do more of that and less of like this holistic in-house marketing thing. I was also getting to a point where anytime I had conversations with friends or other people at agent in the agency world just about me and my future and my interests, they'd be like, oh well, you're an insurance guy, so maybe this insurance thing would be interesting for you. And I was like, oh no, like I'm becoming an insurance guy. I don't i don't want that, right? And so that's when I decided to go and get my MBA, because it was purely how can I, like, I learned so much about one industry, insurance, by going through this rotational program and then landing in marketing, that I was like, okay, I need that for like nine other industries just so I can scratch the itch of intellectual curiosity. Does every business work the way this business works? Does all marketing work the way Geico's marketing works? Obviously, the answer is no, they're wildly different.
Mhm.
And so going to get my MBA was an opportunity for me to go learn business the way I did over the course of 4 years at Geico in like a rapid fire 2 year thing. That's like the resume story, the interview story I tell. The real answer is I tried interviewing at ad agencies and they were like, you can be an account guy for this insurance company. And I was like, oh, but
Mm.
then I would just stay where I am. I'm not going to, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, when you went to Harvard, was it sponsored by Geico, or did you go on your own accord?
no, I went on my own
Yeah,
for a number of reasons, right? I knew I wanted to escape insurance. I left the door open
yeah.
to say, hey, if things change and there's a reason for me to come back, like we can figure that out. I'm open to the conversation. But the truth of the matter was, I think my interests were in trying to do what I had been doing at Geico for five or six other companies, right? And maybe it would be client side, maybe it would be agency side, ideally agency side. Um, and so that was that journey, and I was really lucky to go to a place like HBS where every day I had to read two or three case studies and argue with a group of 90 really smart people about what that business should do based on the dynamics of the category, based on the industry they're in, and based on their business model. And so it was that like perfect confluence of, wow, I'm learning about, one day I was doing an accounting case study for a whiskey company. The next day I was doing a marketing case study for a uh, 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 chicken contact lens company. The next day I was doing a entrepreneurship business model lesson on Disney. And so it was just, I learned how all these different verticals worked so that my brain could start to process the application of what I knew to be true at Geico to all these different industries. And that was
Yeah.
always my roadmap of, okay, if I can do that, then I can know enough to be dangerous about most industries and apply my lessons from insurance to these other industries to hopefully convince someone at some agency somewhere to hire me.
I love that. Would you recommend agency uh, folks that work at agencies? Do you think MBA is a good path into the industry, a way to supercharge your career? What is your general thoughts on MBA programs for people in our industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've answered this question probably 200 times, and I don't know that I've ever given the same answer. So here comes answer number 201. Um,
Let's go.
I think it was the right choice for me, and it was absolutely necessary for me because I could not have gotten into the industry without doing it. Um,
Hmm.
well, I guess I could have as an account person on an insurance client, which I
Yep.
would not have enjoyed. Um, I think for people who are lucky enough to find their way into the industry, at an early age and prove that they're good at it, you don't need to, because you get that on the job experience of
Mm.
learning 9 different industries, right? Especially, well, anywhere I've worked, I love working with the junior folks to be like, go learn everything about this thing. And then next week, go learn everything about that thing and like make mistakes and I'll help guide you. And the team is here to kind of wrap their arms around you because like this is your MBA. This is your chance to go learn different business models, different ways of marketing, like test it all out and absorb as much as you can. And then you don't need to go do what I did. I had to do it because I didn't have another way in, or at least not a way in that made sense to me. And by the way, even after getting my MBA, I didn't have a clear way in because all of a sudden I was this guy with this expensive Harvard MBA that didn't have any industry experience. And people were like, he's going to be expensive and we don't know if he's good at this. And so it was still very difficult to break in. And there were a few folks who were, fellow HBS alum or who were other MBAs that I was lucky enough to get contact connected to through my network that would kind of tell me like, hey, when you walk in the door, you got to position yourself this way because you're going to scare people or they're not going to know what to do with you. Or if you don't know what value you're going to add to their clients, then they don't have a spot for you. And so I think that's always the mindset I've had is show up, be a learner and try to be as intentional about what path you want as possible. If you want to go from being agency side to client side, yeah, an MBA is a great idea. If you want to go client side to
Mm.
agency side, an MBA is a great idea. If you're a really good agency person, right? Like this isn't like investment banking, where if you're really good at investment banking, or you're a really good consultant at McKinsey, they send you to get your MBA and then bring you back because you learn all those connections, you get all that stuff, right? This industry
Yeah.
doesn't require that. If you're really good at it now, and by the way, this is one of the main reasons I joined this industry, is it's one of the only remaining meritocratic industries out there. If you're really good at this stuff at a really young age, you're going to go way further, way faster than you would if you took a 2-year break to go get an MBA anyway. So, like, if you know you're good at it, just go, just do as much as you can, learn as much as you can, be as exposed to as many different styles as you can as early as possible. And if you're good, you're gonna grow.
Yeah, I love it. I think you outlined, where it's applicable, kind of leaving client side and getting that diversity of industry experiences. And sounds like your network, I mean, the HBS network is probably one of the most powerful business networks out there. So being able to get access to people who could help point you direct in the right direction and make connections was probably invaluable too. So, all right. So where'd you end up after B school? What was the first shop that you landed at?
Yeah, so it was a place. It's now part of a conglomerate of branding and design agencies. It was called the Brand Union, and it was a perfect mix of like left brain, right brain, right? It was part management consultancy, so they weren't afraid that I had an MBA. It was design and creative, and there was even like an in-house creative agency. So it was big long-term brand strategy stuff. It was big, corporate identity work. It was very thoughtful and methodical, and the creatives that I worked with there were so strategic that I almost felt unnecessary. If like a little bit of imposter syndrome. But it was a fascinating time because we were doing stuff for Coca-Cola in the early days on sustainability. We were working with Time Warner Cable pre AOL, post, I don't remember. I think it was post AOL on like a massive rebrand. I think that if you walk around the streets of New York City, there's still like sewer caps that have the logo we designed engraved in them. Like really cool, big, broad, global stuff. GlaxoSmithKline and all these massive clients. And it just gave me this big holistic vision, right? That stuff I worked on at Geico of brand, capital B, is all these things was just a really easy narrative for me to walk in the door with to any prospective client. And I think people appreciated that I wasn't just trying to sell them a logo or do the thing that we were good at. I was trying to help them grow their business. And sometimes objectively, I was able to say, oh no, no, you don't need the thing we make. you need this thing. So we'll go get a partner that does that thing and we'll do that and then we'll do our bit. And I think that's one of the things that's guided me through my career is the ability to stay objective and just put what the put the right answer first. We have a thing here at Forsman. The only boss is the task itself. Like you have to obsess over what the
Mm,
right thing to do is, and then everybody has to subvert themselves to that. That's the thing we need to accomplish, right? What's the best way to do it? And maybe it's that funny joke you wanted to tell in that ad you wrote 2 years ago, creative, or maybe Eric, it's that strategy you wanted to recycle from that other client that you didn't win the pitch on. But it's probably not those things. It's probably its own thing that needs to be solved in its own way. And when you get people to subvert themselves to a task like that, it totally changes the relationship, client and agency. It changes the outcome. You're thinking about growth and business holistically, as opposed to thinking about what ad am I going to make and how many times is my mom going to see it on TV. Um, and, and and things like creative awards or stuff like that that oftentimes gets way too much or way too little focus, it just becomes a symptom of doing the right thing instead of a means unto itself. And so um I've always loved that ability to try to stay objective and to help others stay objective as to like what is the thing that's going to work, what's the thing that's going to move the business or the brand or the consumer or whatever it is, and how do we just all focus on that? So
yeah,
yeah, go ahead.
I think it's no, I was just going to say it's probably no accident that you started off at a brand consultancy or a company known for doing rebrands. There's been a lot of blowback on rebrands recently. Cracker Barrel comes to mind, and a hundred other examples. It seems like in the modern social media world, companies no longer own their brands 100%. It's not really their choice anymore because the audience and the consumer and their customers, and even people who aren't customers but have an opinion, everybody gets a say now. When is it important for a company to go through a rebrand? What are the right moments, inflection points, signals from the outside world? Like, when should a brand be going through this idea of like, do we need to refresh? Do we need to update our logo and our corporate identity and our colors and all the things? Because sometimes it feels like it's just an easy thing for a new CMO to do, to kind of stamp their DNA from the top of the organization down to the bottom. But I imagine there are situations where it absolutely is necessary. So would love to get your thought on what are some things that CMOs and leaders should be thinking about when they embark going down the path of should we even do this and why?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm going to try to avoid any commentary on any blowback on any of these. But I think
Yeah.
I think what's really important, and there were dozens of frameworks that we used at Brand Union to help decide exactly these questions. But if you're trying to reach new audiences, if you're post M&A or your company's undergoing a new direction, but I think most importantly, if there's some sort of misalignment between your business model, your business strategy, and your brand strategy, or there's
Mm,
some sort of misalignment between your brand strategy and your audience's needs, desires, etc. Right? Because everything's moving all the time, and especially now that we don't control our own brands anymore, that doesn't mean we don't know who they are and what their point of view on the world is. And I think what's really important is when you have a really strong foundational point of view on the world, as everything else around it changes, you can just comment on that stuff. When your brand strategy is one of the balls floating around with all the other balls floating around, that's when we get into trouble, right? So I think whether or not it involves a logo change, to me, is irrelevant. It's about aligning your brand strategy with your business strategy. It's about understanding your brand's role in the world and then making the
mm.
necessary changes to bring the right people on board with that for your business, for your brand, for your people, for your employees, etc. And I think that allows businesses to be in control of their point of view, even if they're not in control of people's opinion on it. I think,
Yeah.
yeah, and I think proof of that to me is when the most valuable brands lists come out every year and things like that. Um, Patagonia and Chick-fil-A always find themselves near the top of that list, even though half of America's population like hates both of those brands. And, and and I think what's interesting though is that brand value isn't so much about do I like it or not, it's do I buy it or not, and do I think it's better than something else or not. And just because I don't like your opinion or the stand you're taking or whatever doesn't mean I don't think your product's great, or doesn't mean that I don't give you respect for standing up for what you believe in. And so I think there's something really interesting to me about the upside of knowing who you are and proclaiming that to the world consistently. As I said before, Geico, the marketing was really just the public promise of the thing you're going to get from us. And then everything else we did had to prove it. It's the same with these brands, right? And so is the Cracker Barrel logo a uh, part of the experience that promises what the new Cracker Barrel is? I don't know, because I don't know what the new Cracker Barrel is. And and it sounds like to their core audience there was nothing wrong with the old Cracker Barrel. So
Yeah.
like this is where these things like modernization for the sake of modernization, or logo redesign or no logo redesign, if it doesn't start with we are this and we believe this for these people and we don't care if we offend those people, if you can't start there, then you're lost. And it doesn't matter if you design it or redesign it or unredesign it. Like the equity's gone because you've proven that you
Mm,
don't know who you are.
yeah, you're already, kind of at bay. And it sounds like it's an example of one of those brands where the executives didn't go spend 2 or 3 weeks in their restaurants, to get close to the food, close to the customer, close to the employees. All right. So sounds like that was a very formative notch in your career, but where'd you head next?
Yeah, so ultimately, and I'll give you the short version of this, or we can do the long version of each of these steps along the way. It's
Sure.
fun. What a walk down memory lane. And by the way, I owe so much to all the people who taught me and partnered with me along the way at all these places. Like I'm nowhere and nothing in my career without the folks who gave me a shot or said, "Hey, I need your brain on this real quick." It's never like the assignments that I was running that are the formative things. It's the ones where, Wally Krantz, what's up, Wally, would pull me aside
Nice.
and be like, "Hey, dude, I need you to like represent the creative in this one meeting. I never let strategists talk about creative, but I need you to do it this time." And like, whoa, what a compliment! And I better get my shit together, right? And so it's throughout my career, I've been really lucky to have those experiences with people who are much more talented than I am, kind of saying like, "Let's do this together," or "You take a shot at this one," or whatever. So ultimately, brand union was amazing and foundational and formative. But given where the world was going, given where the internet was going, given where we were spending 2.5 years on a brand strategy project that would take another year to roll out. Um, and we were living in a world where brands were getting changed and upset by their customer base overnight based on some tweets. And so for me, that brand consulting world was great, but it was too much thinking and not enough making. And I
Hmm.
believed very strongly that the world was going to like a if you're not making things, then you don't have a point of view type of world, like I just talked about. Like every part of the experience has to revolve around the business and brand strategy so that you can go prove what you say. So I very fortuitously went to go work at a place called Mekanism, which at the time,
Oh yeah, yeah. I remember Mac.
yeah,
Well, I think I worked with Brendan Gahan for years. On the
yeah.
social side of
So I
stuff.
worked with him there. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
interestingly, the founders, when I was in business school, um, I'll give the short version of the story. When I was in business school, I did a project basically on their business model to be like, "Hey, you're a
Wow.
production company, but I think you're more than a production company. You should be more than a production company." And they called me like 3 years later and they were like, hey, we're more than a production company now. In fact, like we hardly do production, and we're going direct to client on all this stuff. Sorry, not we hardly do production. We're no longer a production company for agencies. We are an agency that also does production. We go direct to client on all this stuff now. And we need to figure out how to scale this. We want a presence in New York. And so for me, I was like, oh, this is incredible. Like I get to go help build this thing. And that, you know, credit to Jason and Tommy and Ian and
Mhm.
Pete. Like they did all the hard work of actually transitioning their entire business model. And they're like, hey, you want to jump on this train while it's already like the rocket ship's already taken off? I was like, hell yeah.
Let's
So
go.
I joined that, and it was an incredible run. I think we spent 3.5 years, 4 years almost together, building up a New York office. Like all of a sudden, taking this idea of like brand plus influencers plus production, all under one roof. And I think I don't know if I'm exposing secrets here, but it's it's a long time ago. Um, but one of the secrets was like a lot of our creative directors were also like directors like film directors. And so we
Mm,
could walk into a pitch and be like, here's the idea, here's the script, and here's the treatment. Like
mm,
just press go. And it happened to be at this time when the world was obsessed with make as much content as possible, right? Like the advertising version of move fast and break things was like I feel like Mechanism for those years. I remember I was in charge of like keeping track of new business stuff, and we were pitching 70, 80 things a year and winning half of them. It was wild.
that's
But
wild.
our mentality was like pitch fast and make things, like pitch it, win it, make it, next one, and just keep on rolling. And to be honest, I think that agency at that time, like the rest of the industry just couldn't keep up with us. So it was
Yeah.
really, really fast, a really, really fun, and again, formative to have this like fortuitous experience of like going from this very thoughtful, considered brand ecosystem world of Geico and brand consulting to this like just just come up with it and make it and come up with it and make it and come up with it and make it. And that's the brand. Right. And we do the strategic and foundational stuff. And we were, we weren't just a project-based agency. We were global AOR for Ben and Jerry's and Jim Beam and the, like big brands doing
Hmm.
really cool stuff. The North Face, um, and so it was just fascinating to me to see like the complete opposite. And ultimately, for me, it was a bit of like, are we making too much stuff? Have I moved in my career for what I think is right for the marketing world from like uh, thinking too much and not making enough to zoop, making too much and not thinking enough? Um, and it was like right at that time when I had an opportunity to go join Crispin, which as I mentioned earlier, when I was at Geico, like I was showing up to like Geico meetings with like a fake case study from Burger King from Crispin in my hands that I wrote myself to be like, this is how marketing is really done, and this is why Burger King is exploding in growth, and they found their audience. And when that opportunity arose, it was such a no-brainer for me, simply because, well, I should say, it was really hard to leave the amazing stuff we were building at Mechanism, which I think now has proven to kind of be the future model, and they're doing great things. But Crispin had always been this perfect blend of thinking and making, and the thing that really drew me to it, and it's the same story for why I joined Forsman now, almost 10 years after my Crispin journey, was that it was always about business transformation through the lens of creativity, but creativity did not mean ads, right? What I
Mm,
loved about my time at Crispin was we would do what I did on that project at Geico. We would show up for a pitch and be like, well, in store you look like this, and the French fry container once you get it home ends up looking like this, and this doesn't match with that thing you said there, and when you talk about this over here, it has to match the way you show up on social media over here. And it was just this holistic way of thinking about how to change someone's business with ideas and technology and innovation. I was really fortunate to be working with the team ran the Domino's account, and that
Hmm.
massive digital transformation that Domino's went through, through emoji ordering to the pizza delivery car to all that stuff. And those guys spun out and made work in progress where they've grown tremendously and are doing what is like modern marketing over there. So it was just so cool. Hotels.com, Kraft Mac and Cheese, Fruit of the Loom. We were taking these like iconic legacy brands and saying, yeah, cool. Like we know you made an ad last year, but your real problem is you're not relevant to a new generation. And like one ad's
Mm.
not going to fix that. What you need is a real idea, a real strategy, a real approach. And it was just an amazing incubator of ideas that didn't rely on, okay, we have to make an ad to get paid. So let's make sure we go convince the client that they need ads, right? The model was, we're going to help them change their business, and we're going to use creativity as the way to do it. And
Wow.
so it was just an incredible experience. Lived in Boulder. My daughter was born out in Boulder, Colorado, which an incredible place, and really really fun. The thing I'm probably most proud of is that so many of the folks that were on the strategy team during those Crispin days are now like CSOs or co-founders of awesome agencies, and it's just something that's really cool because it was a place where everyone was always challenging each other, right? Like the strategist would like have a really good brief and then be like, all right, creatives, like, can you handle this? And then the creatives would be like, you know what? Yeah, we can. And they'd come back with something that blew our minds, and then we'd come back and like, and that built this trust. And then we could just start rolling on stuff. We were writing briefs together. We were solving problems together. The wall at Crispin, which was this physical wall where the work would get put up and taken down and changed physically on the wall every day, was again this. It's like the creative process, uh, uh, happening right in front of you, and
Yeah.
and that just it taught me that creativity is a way to solve problems, it's not an output.
I love that. Crispin was the Boulder office. That was the first agency that I called at as a, biz dev guy that used to walk into agencies. That was truly different. It wasn't
Yeah,
like, I don't think you had seen kind of the, agency approach to like office space and office culture as kind of core to the DNA, but like just walking, well, first of all, the drive, right? I remember talking to a lot of Crispin execs over the years, that especially out of the Boulder office, that would be like, we lose half of our recruiting candidates just on the drive out here because they land in Denver from New York or LA or
yeah,
Miami or somewhere else,
yeah.
Chicago, and then they start driving a half hour into cow country. And a lot of times they just tell the car service to turn around and take them back to the airport. I don't
Yeah.
know if it was I don't know if it was as bad as I'm making it sound, but yeah,
No,
there
it wasn't.
definitely there was an element of like you had to have somebody who was willing to change their lifestyle to some degree and join this funky town of Boulder. It's a college town. It's a
Yeah.
place where you go because you want to go hiking and snowboarding and skiing every single day. It's a big change from being in a lot of these major metropolitan cities where agencies kind of were traditionally based. But also, you walk in and you hear about the Sherpa, the guy that puts the bike racks on
Yeah.
anybody's cards, or like you walk up to the kiosk where you can pull the phone off the thing and a Domino's pizza will be there like
100%.
within 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Will you talk about kind of that idea of agency, kind of building a creative culture, but also like a space that it's like I hate companies that think that their environment is culture, but to some degree, when done right, it is part of the culture.
Well, in a place like that, it was a reflection of the fact that you had to want to be there. You had to commit
Mm.
to that place. If you recall, it wasn't fancy. It was like plywood
No,
and
it's like
and
plywood. Yeah, that's what I was
yeah.
gonna say.
And the idea, I think there was some lore around this, and I wasn't there when Alex built the place, but the lore was that like he kind of built it like, hey, I built this thing in 2 days and I can tear it down in 2 days too. Like it was just a reminder of like the temporary nature of stuff, which I thought was really cool. But it meant that, to your point, like once you make that drive, I mean, we when I went for my interview out there, we had my son was 4 weeks old. No,
Wow.
I'm sorry. My son was about to be born in 4 weeks. My 8.5 month pregnant wife and I flew out. It was a snowstorm, so she couldn't even like leave the hotel we were staying in. I took a car to the agency and back, and then we went home and got on a plane. And she was like, "I can't do this." So like it is this like and she did it because she's incredible. Um,
That's great.
but it's this real commitment that you have to make. And what's great is like you leave that at the door. You walk in that door every morning and you know that everyone else already made that commitment. You don't have to question someone's uh uh integrity. You don't have to question like, oh, you are you taking a long lunch today to go interview at the agency down the street? Like you're there. You're there and you're committed, and everyone just like accepted that, and then we could just get all the BS out of the way. All the politics were gone. It was like, let's go do the thing. It's all up there on the wall. Let's just go do it today. And every day it was like that. And it bred a culture of like hunger and desire. I think one of the things that the post-pandemic world has ruined for agency life is the learning opportunities that people get when they see
Mm,
creative problem solving happen in public. And I say this about my time at Crispin. I say this about my time with Ari Weiss at DDB and Wendy Clark as well. The three of us, like even when everyone's in little offices at DDB or on different floors, like we tried to do the creative process in public as much as possible because one, everyone learns from it, even by just overhearing it while they're writing emails. And two, it creates this hunger, right? You get jealous of an idea that you see, and then you want to go be a part of it. And it's one of the things that was a hallmark of my time at Crispin was I'd get like an email about an RFP for a new business pitch, and I'd hit print, and by the time I walked to the printer and got it, there'd be like a junior strategist, a mid-level account person, and a senior creative like standing at the printer holding it up waiting for me to be like, what's this? Why do we have this? I want to pitch this brand. I already have ideas for this brand. Like, can we start tonight? Do you want to jam on it a little bit? And it was this, it again, like to your point, this energy was just, it was there. Like I'm here, I'm in this office. Yeah, I can go like skiing or go on a mountain bike ride or whatever, but like I'm not like going to the theater tonight. Like I'm like, let's work. Let's solve problems together. And like everyone had that, and it was really magical. And I think that it results in the kind of work you see.
yeah, I think that's great. I love the idea of kind of being in this no man's land, free from creative distractions, and so many, exciting smaller boutiques popped out of CPB and into that ecosystem of Boulder and Denver, and brands, like Crocs making it their home,
Yeah.
et cetera. You mentioned something, this idea of like learning opportunities being missed with this post-COVID, hybrid work environment. Where have you guys landed in kind of the post-COVID, return to office or shakeup? Because I definitely see it, as somebody who my job is prior to COVID, half the time was to travel around the country, either go to the
Yeah.
client side or agencies and do the lunch and learn, right? Like, hey, I'll buy you guys lunch if you
Yeah.
guys hear me talk about my thing.
That
And
that'll trick. Oh, I'm already in
yeah.
Denver this week, so why don't I just pop over?
Exactly. And post COVID, I've only been in one agency, and I feel like I represent a pretty unique blend of different tools.
Yeah.
Always early stage stuff, right? So I'm never going to be on the important list as a Google or a Meta or even like mid-sized publishers and offerings. But I do feel like it was so easy to get into these agency offices and even into the clients as a business development person, just with that value exchange of like, hey,
Yeah.
let's show you what we do. Let's talk about it. Can you talk about where you guys are in the cycle of like return to office, and what is your guys' opinion on that idea of like spending time together, and
Yeah.
creativity is a team sport, and if you don't have proximity, there's something to be lost there.
100%. So I think our kind of general opinion is we want people to want to solve problems together, and
Mm,
but we're not going to force people to do that, right? There are efficiencies of working in certain ways and things like that. But we find that, especially for the hard stuff, especially for pitches, especially for big, annual brand planning moments for our clients and things like that, that people want to be together because it's easier to solve the hard stuff together. Um, I think what I find, and by the way, the other thing that I think is really interesting is like, especially because we're a Swedish founded agency that still has our two biggest offices in Sweden. Return
mm.
to office in Sweden was never really a big deal because they were never held hostage in their offices before the pandemic, right? So like
Mm.
work life integration had kind of happened 30 years ago out there. So when like everyone was, and Sweden had a different approach to handling the pandemic anyway, but let's leave that aside. But
Sure.
on all my trips out there, it's like, yes, sometimes a few people don't come in because they have something going on at home, but I'm pretty sure it was that way before the pandemic too. And it's just a culture of people who want to be together to solve these problems. And I think the same thing happens in all of our offices around the world, that when there's an extenuating circumstance, or when it's just easier or more efficient to not have everybody commute and try to be in the same place at the same time, fine. We have all the tools we need to do like what we're doing right now, right? Like film a podcast remotely. Cool. But there is more magic that happens when people are together doing stuff, and our folks recognize that. But we're not going to force them. Like, we're not going to. It's not forced fun. It's not icebreakers at a company retreat where like you have to be here and interact with each other. Um, I think the bigger, or as big a risk slash damage, is I, like you, find it a lot harder to get time to pop by the client's offices, right? It,
Mm.
it used to be like, you do not, and this, I mean, as much as I can remember, this is basically the last 3 years, 3.5, 4 years I've been here at Forsman post pandemic. Like, it's the only time it's ever in my career been acceptable to do a creative presentation virtually. That
Crazy.
was, you would never show creative work on a Zoom, and I still hate doing it. I try not to pitch it on Zoom because it doesn't make any sense. You're trying, like, let's have we have clients do this all the time in pitches. Let's do a chemistry meeting. It'll be virtual.
Oh my gosh, that's impossible.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah, that
I
can't
mean,
happen.
yeah, I mean, look, these tools are amazing. But, even with the podcast, any show that I do when I have somebody in a studio, uh, it's not just a different style of chemistry, like, being able to see the white of their eyes and the energy,
Yeah,
and being able to interact with somebody in the physical world, and the play that you get off kind of riffing with somebody, but just the production value. Like, any show that I've taped in a studio environment gets, much better, it results as well, because people just I think are attracted to the chemistry of people
yeah,
being in the same room together, and also the production value. It's awesome. We all see enough Zoom calls. It's a means to an end, and
that's exactly right.
people can still get the information. But I think people want to see, even from a podcast perspective, people want to see people collaborating and feeding and vibing off each other in the real world. So I love that take. I think you guys are approaching it the right way, and I love the idea that Forsman, for it's essentially kind of built into the culture of the agency that this was how things should be done before COVID. And I love that you didn't say work-life balance; you said work-life integration, right? Which I think is that idea that, like, hey, we love what we do. We're going to do it more often than we spend time with our family. We're going to do it on Saturdays. We're going to do it on Sundays. We're going to do it on holidays because it's what we love. And what else would we be doing if we weren't doing that, unless we're having some free time or going on vacation or something like that. So I'm
That's
gonna
exactly
keep
right.
I'm gonna keep you a little long if you've got the time for it.
No problem.
All right,
Happy to
so
talk, as is apparent by this conversation. I'm always happy to talk.
no, let's go. Well, look, I've I feel like we could do a V2 anytime, and we might have to do that anyways. But I feel like I need to give you the opportunity to talk about Forsman, and I want to ask you a few questions around what you guys are up to today. So let's skip ahead if you don't mind.
Yeah,
Talk
of course.
about coming over to Forsman. What were you excited about? And then, well, let's start with that. Yeah. Tell me about, when the opportunity presented itself and what made you make the move 4 years ago.
Yeah, it was really, really clear. This was a place that I had admired
Hmm.
for 15 years from very far away, um, and an opportunity came up pretty unexpectedly for me to jump in and help take the magic that was happening in Sweden and you know make more of it in more places around the world. And that magic, I think, is that combination of empathy, objectivity, and just really smart, really focused people all rallying around solving problems. I think the degree, and you'll, it's funny, like my time at Forsman has so colored how I talk about creativity in general, because I just think that
Mm,
this place has the right approach to it. It is not an output, it is an approach to solving problems. It is not a
mm,
department, it is an approach to solving problems, right? Everyone here is creative. And one of the things that I think Forsman has very much in common with Crispin was my early days at Crispin. We used to write job descriptions for like account people and strategists and other people as looking for a failed creative who is now an account person, or looking for a failed copywriter who's now a strategist, because we wanted people to show up and say, I'm creative too. And I think this is a place that's always embraced that, because the conversation and the closeness with clients allows for us to say, hey, what is it that we're really trying to accomplish here? Like, yes, we see the brief, we love the brief, we'll do the brief, but but why this brief and what's behind it? And when you start having those conversations, you start doing different kinds of things that aren't an ad, things that the client didn't ask for, but maybe more impactful than they ever could have asked for. And it, again, it changes the relationship, it changes the dynamic. So I've always seen that from afar. I've also just always been really intrigued, you know, growing up as an American. Um, where things are pretty rigid and hierarchical in corporate America, like this socialist flat hierarchy was always the way I worked anyway. And it was always where I found my best opportunities, even when I was quite young, to make an impact, was when there was a flat hierarchy where the best idea really, really did win and could really come from anywhere. And this place has believed in that more than I think any place I've ever been or seen. And so it was a no-brainer to come join it and say, like, yeah, we need more of the world, more of the industry to think this way, work this way, have this magical objectivity, to solve more problems.
I love that. That's cool. You read about flat organizations like Netflix and others, and kind of the brand culture document that went famous and came out of that organization. And I also love the idea that creativity isn't a department, it's a skill set, and it's really, a human characteristic.
That's right.
We're all creative in some way. We all have good ideas. And, I always joke, like, sitting in creative meetings as a business development person, and I always have to preface, I'll throw an idea out there. I'll be like, but I'm just a sales guy. and,
That's right.
and every once in a while I'll catch, but I think, good account people, good business development people, they're the advocate for the client. So, they're the ones that spend the most time with clients, know them the best, and can hopefully be the arbitrator of, like, at least that first layer of, what would they respond to. The something that I noticed is that I have never quite seen your title anywhere else. So you're the global MD, but you're also the chief product officer. So tell me a little bit more about the the product officer side of that title.
Yeah, I think it's another really important thing about kind of the culture and the way this place works is that one of our founding philosophies is that strategy is creative and creative is strategy. That those things are one process. I think too often, uh, uh, I'll blame, I guess, the big agency world over decades of success. The assembly line of like account person takes brief from client, account person delivers brief to strategist or planner, planner rewrites as creative brief, planner hands off to creatives go do whatever the hell they want, and then everybody sits in a room and tries to poke holes in it. Like, that's never been the way I've worked. That's never been the way this place has worked. And so, because creativity is not the output, solutions to problems are the output, we call that combination of strategy and creativity our product. And so, my role is really to make sure that I'm working with our clients to find the right problems to solve. And then I'm working with the breadth of our creative collective and people who may or may not have expertise in this area or may or may not make ads or whatever to find the most impactful, inventive solution to that problem, right? The solution to the problem is our product. That's ultimately what I hold myself and the organization and our clients hold me accountable to is did we find the right problem and did we solve it? Which again is really different from is that ad beautiful or award winning or even is that ad effective, right? Like maybe it shouldn't have been an ad in the first place. Congratulations that it's effective. I love that. But was there a bigger problem to solve? Did it outperform other ads like it or last year's ad, or did it actually completely change the way consumers view this product or category or whatever else, right? And so again, like if I go back to my Geico example, the real unlock was we need to position, and I didn't do this, someone did. Uh, we need to position Geico as cheap and easy in a category where you only win if you are trustworthy and big and safe and right. We'll be the cheap and easy one. Ooh. Whoever made that decision is the product, right? Because the problem was really clear on what to solve. The internet's coming, and whoever does this is going to win. Let's go win the internet. And how do we win the internet? Cheap and easy. Got it.
Wow.
Right? That is the difference between, us at Forsman being or wanting to be an ad agency. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And being an ad agency that just really wants to help clients grow. An
Yeah.
ad is not our product. An ad might be an output of the product, but the product is the decisions we make, the solution to the problem that we've been given.
I love that. So, with that in mind, and something we talked about at the very beginning of the show, how do you structure scopes and work with your clients on a historic business model that's compensated on
Making ads.
how making ads and how those ads come, from soup to nuts and how you charge and bill for those things? How do you reimagine the client dynamic and the business model
Yeah, we
to fit
explore
that?
we explore lots of different models with our clients, and we run lots of different models with our clients. Some of them are growth based, some of them are performance based, some of them are kind of like a bucket of hours the old way with
Hmm.
opportunistic upside on new stuff. So it really depends on the situation. And to be honest, I think it's an industry problem that we're all struggling with because you've got procurement departments at clients that are saying an ad is an ad is an ad, and we just need ads from you. Those generally don't tend to be great clients for us because like we're going to do so much more than just the ad. We'll make the ad too. And so what we've started to do is be really deliberate about productizing. How do we organize the things we sell, and how do we put price tags on those based on what they deliver or what outcomes they deliver, as opposed to what amount of hours or staffing plan or whatever go into it. And what we find is that everyone kind of ends up happier that way because if you're really good at it, then you as the agency can do it quite efficiently, and you don't need to have a staffing plan of 70 people on there. And if you're really good at it, it works. So the client doesn't mind that, hey, I got to the right answer, but it only took you a week to get there instead of a month. Like, shame on you. You don't get paid money anymore. That's like that's misaligned incentives, right? Talk about business model and brand strategy alignment. Like, business model and payment model alignment needs to work itself out too. Everyone should
Yeah.
win when some really smart people get to the best possible solution the quickest possible way.
Yeah, that's a great point. And now with AI speeding up processes and making things that once took weeks happen in seconds, that ability to deliver fast, as long as it's still high quality, is probably more important than how many total hours you took to get the job done, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, I talked about Mechanism back in the day being like pitch fast and make things. Like, I can only imagine if AI had been dropped into our laps when we were in that zone back then. Like, it would have been crazy. But I don't like. I think AI has done a tremendous job of helping with workflows and helping with inspiration and information. But insight and problem definition and things like that aren't going to get spit out without expertise and humanity. And so we use a ton of AI tools. We use them in very specific ways to help us do what we already do better. But we don't try to like replace ourselves. We know how important it is to have synthesis as opposed to just intelligence.
Yeah, AI is just a bigger vacuum.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, the way I've always thought about the creative process is you start with as much information as possible. That's what AI is really good at. You distill it down to insight. You can train an AI to be decent at that, but they need to turn that insight into a creative inspiration. You need to make some really big decisions, right? I'll use the Geico example again. Cheap and easy. Like, I don't think if it looked at the category at that time, any AI, no matter how trained it was or how bold it was, would tell you that's the way to win. Someone made that decision. That decision became inspiration for the agency. And then someone had to have taste. And for a long time, it was Ted, had to have the taste to be like, yes, that crazy thing is exactly what we're going to go do to communicate cheap or easy or value or whatever. I'm going to get killed, by the way, for saying cheap and easy over and over again. It was value.
Right,
But I
right.
think I think
Gotta have the.
it's really clear that it's inevitable that it's going to help us all, but it's going to help us all be better versions of ourselves. And I, I'm hopeful that that doesn't become a signal to the markets or Wall Street or whatever to be like, oh well, everyone's better now, so you need half as many of them. I think
Hmm.
this is still a talent sport, and so you need really good people to do the stuff, even if doing the stuff becomes writing really good prompts or whatever. It remains a talent sport. And what I found throughout my career is that in this business, people who are really good are prolific compared to people who are just good, right? Like, an A+
Hmm.
person can do 10 times as much as an A- person. And while the delta between them on paper is very small, the output and the quality of that output is astronomical.
Yeah. Same thing on the biz dev side. 80% of the revenue comes from 20% of the output, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
no, I love it. All right. I think that's probably a good place to end, at least for this show. So, awesome conversation, Eric. It was great to be able to walk through your background a little bit, and we'll have to do a V2 to finish the story.
All good.
Um, where would you like to point people to learn more about Forsman Bodenfors, or where would you like people to connect with you directly?
Yeah, you can hit me up on LinkedIn. That's quite easy. Or forsman.com. Take a look. You'll see for yourselves the work, the case studies, There's very few, here's the ad we made case studies. It's all longitudinal stories about brand and business transformation. And I think that's one of the things that makes me most proud. And as I said before, one of the reasons I joined this place is that mentality is perfectly aligned with the way I think. So thank you for having me, Dylan. This was great, and happy to chat again anytime.
You got it, man. Well, for those of you who are watching at home, if this is the first time you're seeing the show, don't forget to give us a follow or a subscribe. If you're listening on a podcast platform, if you give us a review, that's how we find a larger audience organically. And most importantly, if there's a brand marketer out there that you think needs to focus on fixing problems, not making more ads, or somebody in the agency world who is looking for a home or a shop or a place where they can throw their creative hat with that type of culture. Or maybe somebody who's thinking, is an MBA the right way for me to continue to go down the path of my advertising career? Don't forget to share the show. And with that, Eric, I will bid you a great day, and we'll talk again soon.
Thanks so much. Talk soon.